This is a topic to speak on, and I'm happy to say that we were pleased when we got this opportunity, because this is a topic that, for lack of better words, is somewhat near and dear to our hearts. We find it a very pertinent topic. We find it very timely. So I'm excited to come here and talk about this today, and to spend some time with you discussing this. This is what was given to us as sort of the paragraph of what we're going to speak on. Transforming an existing dry facility into a cold storage facility can save time and money. However, there are certain aspects to consider before diving into a retrofit project. So this was given to us, and the first thing that jumped out to me was that second sentence of there are certain aspects to consider before diving into a retrofit project. We like to say more to the point, there's actually a lot to consider. And I've got an hour here today. I've got Bill Hudson's watch up here to kind of keep time. We could spend hours discussing this. There's so many considerations. There's so many things to think about. So I'm going to try to run through this as quickly as I can. I've practiced it a couple of times, and I've been at about 45 minutes. So hopefully we'll try to keep on time, because I want to save some time at the end and get some of your feedback and your comments and your questions. I do get the opportunity to speak from time to time, and I enjoy that. But this is a little different because I realize today I'm speaking to a group of my peers. I'm speaking to a group of individuals that know as much or more about a lot of this subject as I do. And that makes it somewhat of a bit of a daunting task. So I hope I'm up to it. But with that said, I certainly will welcome your comments. I will welcome your opinions and your discussions. So I'm looking forward to it. So I've tried to break this down maybe into three headings of how we want to go forward with this. And the first thing we're going to talk about is what I call assumptions versus reality. What are the assumptions when we look at a retrofit project versus what's the actual reality of the situation? Then we're going to look a little bit at the economic viability. And I'm going to go out here a little bit because I'm throwing some numbers out here, some pricing, some cost. And I'm sure that's going to maybe open up to some thoughts that, wow, that's not where I would go, that's not what I would do, that's not the cost I would have. But regardless, I think to make this a good topic, a good discussion, we need to talk a little bit about that. So we're going to get into that a little bit. And then the last thing we're going to look at is what we call the technical considerations. And I've listed a number of things out. And again, we could probably have a 45-minute to an hour presentation on each and every technical consideration that goes into converting a dry box into a cold box. But we're going to spend some time on that and look at that. So, commonly heard assumptions. I have to say, in the last 5 years or so, practically every client that I've met with, every potential client, every sales call, we get this question of, hey, what do you think about getting a dry warehouse and turning it into a cold storage facility? And I say, why? And they say, a lot of reasons. Number one, it's going to be cheaper. It's going to be a lot cheaper. We're going to save money when we do that conversion. Okay, what else? Well, you know what? There's a lot of buildings out there. There's a lot of dry warehouses. They're available. They're empty. And I can go get one and I can buy one really quick and really easy. And they're cheap. People are desperate. They got these dry warehouses. They got to get rid of them. They got to unload that product. So they're desperate. I can go out there and I can get that building, and I can get it at a discount. And you know what? I don't have to worry about site development. And any of us that have done greenfield development know that site development presents its own set of challenges, its own set of risks, its own set of opportunities for problems. So I don't have to worry about site development. That's already been done. And because of all of these things I don't have to worry about, I'm going to get in faster. And all of us know that when we are talking to an owner, operator, a client, whatever, about the fact that they need more cold space, they usually, by the time we get the call, that's when they need the space. They need it today. So earlier occupancy is a certainty. Certainly I can get in there. And I don't have to worry about permitting. I don't have to worry about zoning. I don't have to worry about impact studies. I don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. So I've heard every one of these, some of them multiple times, from a variety of folks. So let's look at some of the realities. Dry warehouse vacancy rate. As you can see, it was chugging along fine in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, things kind of went a little sour. As we are today, the national average on vacancy is at about 11%. In some markets, it's up to as high as 17, 18%. In some markets, it's come back down into more reasonable level in the 7, 8% range. Pretty much the same as seen for 2013. So the vacancy rate is definitely higher than it has been. Let's look at the cold storage vacancy rate. I will tell you I had a little bit more trouble finding exact figures on this, but the best we could tell, it's been right around 2% for the last few years. Now, let me talk about vacancy, because a lot of you are going, well, wait a minute, if there's so little vacant cold storage space, why am I not building more and more and more of it? And I want to make to distinguish between vacancy and occupancy. Right now, the cold storage occupancy rate is somewhere around 85, 86%, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of my type of clients, the owners and operators and users, have available space in their warehouses. But what we're talking about here is vacant. Vacant means empty. It is empty. Now, so there's not very much vacant cold storage space out there. And I've been in some of it. We've all been in some of it. And you probably know if it's empty, there's a reason. And so what I'm calling quality vacant cold storage space, again, this is based on my experience. I Googled and couldn't find any exact numbers. So I'm going by my experience a little bit. I would say less than 10% of that vacant space is quality. In other words, the floors are not in bad shape. You don't have what would be visible vapor leaks. I've been in some where you can actually walk in and you can see daylight through the building. Of course, the refrigeration equipment's turned off. How long it's been turned off, I don't know. What's going to happen when you turn it on, who knows? It's probably 15, 20-year-old equipment. That's not what I would consider a quality cold storage, vacant cold storage space. So there's not much out there. There are deals to be had in the dry warehouse marketplace. Absolutely, the deals are out there. We know that the vacancy rate is high, and we know that it's available. And in fact, a lot of those are trading at prices that we last saw in 2003, 2004, 10 years ago. So there's absolutely deals to be had out there on some of this existing space. There's a lot of them for sale. But, there's always a but, quality is going to match the price too. Again, all of us have been in a lot of these dry or vacant dry warehouses, and what you're going to find is probably a pretty low quality facility. And the other aspect of that is that quality is going to match the price. So if it's a high quality vacant dry warehouse, it's probably not going to be trading at that low price that a lot of potential buyers think it might be. Buying an existing building, and I say buying, but leasing as well, but buying an existing building can also certainly eliminate risk. You will eliminate risk involved with site development. Site development is fraught with risk. What's underneath that ground? What's the quality of that dirt? Do we have rock issues? Do we have water issues? Do we have environmental issues? Site development's fraught with risk. And when you buy an existing building, you're going to eliminate a lot of that risk. Planning and zoning approvals. Any of you that have done greenfield development, whether as an owner, operator, client, design builder, consultant, whatever, have been through planning and zoning process. And it's grueling in some locales. It can take weeks, if not months, to go through the proper planning and zoning that's needed to be done. Impact fees, traffic studies, development fees, these are all things that are going to come up and that you're going to have to look at when you're doing a greenfield development. So buying that building may eliminate all of those. Are you going to be assessed some large fee because now you're having to bring in a number of trucks and there's traffic modification, or there's roadway modifications that need to be made? Is a deceleration lane going to need to be added? Is a, do you have to add a signal out at the intersection adjacent to the building? So usually when the building's built, a lot of these type of issues are eliminated when the building's already built. Utility availability. If you're going into an existing building, it's definitely already going to have water, it's going to have power, it's going to have sewer, it's going to have gas most likely. Now, we're going to talk a little bit later about whether or not it's going to have enough, but it's absolutely going to have this, as opposed to going into a greenfield development where you might have to bring in 1 mile of off-site sewer line just to get to your property, or you've got to add additional water, or you've got to negotiate with the electrical company to get power. So again, having that existing building will eliminate having to worry about that. And land cost negotiations. Typically, when you're negotiating a price of a building, it's a lot easier than negotiating a price of a land. Why? Buildings are usually easier to evaluate and easier to place an appropriate price upon. It's a piece of land, especially if you're dealing with undeveloped land, farmland. Typically, also when you're buying a building, in a lot of cases, you might be dealing with a more sophisticated seller as well. So you will certainly eliminate a number of risks by buying an existing building. However, you're also going to eliminate some opportunities. And the first of those opportunities is going to be some possible incentives. Right now, a lot of locales, a lot of states are offering incentives to bring development into their area. They're hungry for development. So those incentives can be available. They're typically not as available buying an existing building. Sometimes you can get some incentives because you might be bringing in some jobs or more jobs, but incentive opportunities such as property tax abatements, that sort of thing, typically those will be lost when you're buying an existing facility. Site location advantages. When you buy a building, you get what you get. Your neighbors are there, you know who they are, you know what the traffic flow is, you know how far how far off of the interstate you may be, or whatever those logistic needs that you may have. However, a greenfield development opens up more options in terms of maybe giving you some more favorable site location opportunities. And the big one is that you're going to eliminate your build-to-suit opportunities. So again, you get what you get. You get the parameters of that building. You get that building with all of its restrictions, as opposed to being able to build what you want to build that will meet your needs. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later when we go into some of the technical considerations. So, on the surface, retrofitting absolutely can appear to be a sure thing. And some of those assumptions we talked about earlier at the beginning, they hold a lot of water. They can hold a lot of truth. And on the surface, it can look to be the way to go. But in reality, it requires very careful consideration. And it brings along a substantial amount of risk. And those risks are going to impact your costs. They're going to impact your schedule. They may impact the quality of your building. So we're going to look at a little bit of those. Now, I will tell you, this is our experience. And this is where some of you may disagree with where I'm at, but this has been A.M. King's experience. When we go into the evaluation of a retrofit project, converting a dry space into a cold space, and we go through the due diligence and the process, we really find out it only works about 10% of the time. I've done some informal polling of some of my colleagues, competitors, et cetera, and I'm sort of hearing the same numbers. So the question begs, if it only is going to work 10% of the time, or let's say I'm wrong and it's 20% or 30% of the time, is it really worth spending the time, effort, money, resources to investigate something that only has somewhere between a 10 to 30% chance of working? There is an exception. When you have a client or an owner or operator that already owns a facility, we found that it works about 50% of the time. And some of you may be surprised at that because you think, well, that's a slam dunk, you own it. A lot of times we just find out it still doesn't work for a variety of reasons, both cost, technical, et cetera. But it does have a greater probability of happening if that owner already owns that facility. If he has a large warehouse with a cold component and a dry component. He wants to convert some of that dry into cold, or maybe he's got a facility at another location that he's been using for dry, and he's going to go ahead and change that over to cold. That can certainly make a difference. So let's spend a little bit of time on the economic side of it. And what I've attempted to do here is to make a comparison, and to make a comparison of costs of the conversion of existing property compared to a greenfield development. So this is where we're going to get into the numbers a little bit. And like I said, I share these numbers with you with a bit of trepidation, but also with a bit of confidence. So again, let's go forward. We're going forward with a comparison. So what we've got here is we have a 100,000 square foot dry warehouse. And I've made it pretty simple, 400 by 200 feet, nice, clean rectangle. We've carved out about 5,000 square feet of office space. We've got, you know, some dock doors down here at the south side of the building. And we collectively, as the client, have decided to go in and to purchase this facility with the intent to convert it to a cold storage facility. So what I've done is I've looked at where I'm from, Charlotte, North Carolina. We call that the Piedmont region. Charlotte, North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina. So that I-85 corridor. And I've kind of used those numbers. So if you're from California or Texas or the Northwest or the Northeast, you might see some things different. But we can get a nice piece of industrial ground in a decent industrial development park. $45,000 an acre is a pretty good price. And for our 100,000 square foot building, it comes with 10 acres. So we're paying $450,000 for the land. And the fellow that owns that building, this is a fairly quality building. Concrete panels, tilt wall panels, precast panels, structural steel, joist and beam construction, nice 6-inch floor slab. He's not one of these desperate sellers, but we've also got a quality building. It's going to go to about $30 a square foot. So we have now, collectively, we have bought this facility and we've paid $3,450,000 for this facility. So congratulations, you're now the proud owner of a 100,000 square foot warehouse. But this is what you need. You need a 100,000 square foot cold storage facility. And again, I've made it pretty simple. We've got a 38-degree cooler here. We just split it down the middle. We've got a, 38-degree cooler, 38,000 square feet. We've got a negative 10-degree freezer, 38,000 feet. We kept our office down here. We've maintained that because we need the office space. We've decided to go with ammonia refrigeration. We'll talk more about that later, but we've decided to go with ammonia. So we've got a little 3,000 square foot engine room down here. And that leaves us with about 16,000 square feet of cooler dock. You can see that since it was an existing building, we've got a box in a box type construction, insulated metal panels. Box in a box also meaning that we've done an insulated metal panel ceiling at the top. And so we've got developed our own thermal envelope, if you will, inside of the building. So we own our warehouse. This is what we need. So now we've got to go in and start that conversion. We're going to spend about $1.6 million on our envelope with our insulated metal panel walls, with our ceiling structure, doors, whatever. We're going to spend about $1,350,000 on our ammonia refrigeration system. We had a decent amount of electrical in our facility, but we didn't have enough electrical because the dry facilities, typically you're going to have enough electrical to give yourself lighting, maybe a little bit of equipment hookups, some battery charger, general power outlets. Now we've got a substantial refrigeration system. So we're going to spend another $400,000 on electrical. We got to build our machine room. We got to make some modifications there. There's another $150,000. Fire protection, as we all know, fire protection needs change when you go from dry to cold. So we've spent $15,000 on fire protection. And since we have a negative 10-degree freezer, we've had to tear up 38,000 square feet of floor slab. We've had to put in underfloor warming, and now we've had to pour back on top of that. So we have now spent $4,015,000 on our building. Congratulations, now you're deeply in debt. So you have spent $4 million converting what you already spent $3.5 million buying, and you got a total investment price of $7,465,000. But you own that, and that's what you need. But let's look and say, well, what if we were to build it brand new? Because that's my other option. So I'm going to go and I'm going to buy that same piece of ground there somewhere in the Piedmont region of the southeast United States. And I'm going to pay that same $45,000 an acre for those 10 acres, and I'm going to spend that same $450,000. And then I'm going to call my site contractor, and he's going to come out and he's going to move dirt, he's going to put in water lines, he's going to put in sewer lines, he's going to put in storm drainage, he's going to build your parking lot, he's going to put in curb and gutter, et cetera, et cetera. And he's going to charge you $600,000, $60,000 an acre at your 10 acres. And then you're going to hire a company like A.M. King or somebody else in this room, and they're going to build that building for you right here, and they're going to charge you $65 a square foot. So now you're going to pay them $6.5 million. So you have now developed what you want to meet your needs, and you spent $7,550,000. So you build the suit, $7,550,000. That's option number 2. Option number 1, buying that existing building and converting it, you spent $7,465,000. You've saved a grand total by doing a conversion of $85,000. I get it, that looks low. That's just over 1%. That's not much money. My point is, let's say I'm off, wildly off. I've got a really bad estimator, and he's just gone way off, and it should be 10%. So it's $750,000. $750,000 is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. We all know it's a lot of money. Is it $750,000 enough money to maybe jeopardize what exactly you want from a build-to-suit? So it's a decision to be made. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. I'm just trying to look at the reality of it. So let's talk about the economic considerations. Understand a retrofit versus a build-to-suit. The costs may virtually be the same. They may be very, very similar. I would really be surprised in most instances, again, unless you own the building already, if you're going to save much more than a 10% delta. That means that if you're going to buy an existing property, the purchase cost becomes extremely important. And it might be one of the most important things that you do is how much you pay for that existing facility. However, there are risks in development and there are risks in conversions. And the risk of the conversion may be as significant as the risk of the development, or vice versa. Here's the other thing that needs to be considered, is that if you go into an existing facility and you convert it, you may be losing some operational efficiencies. And that's going to lead to cost. So let's go back and say that you've done a conversion and you saved the $750,000. But if you're spending an extra $100,000 a year in inefficiencies due to the fact that your operation can't work as efficiently as it could if you were in the type of building that you needed for your operation, then within 7 years, you're basically going to start bleeding money out. So that brings us back to the technical viability and to our next topic of how important is it to consider some of the technical viabilities and the technical considerations that are important to this conversion. So let's look at that a little bit. And this is where I've got a fairly long list, and I'll try to go through them and talk about them a little bit. The type of existing construction. The one that really jumps out at me is the pre-engineered metal building. I can't tell you how many times I've had a client call us up and say, we looked at this building, we want to buy it, we want to convert it to a cold space, come and look at it, and we go look at it, it's a pre-engineered metal building. Now, I don't have anything against pre-engineered metal buildings. I'm not saying that, but typically they won't work for a cold storage facility. We had one client who called us up and had a small production facility, and he wanted to enlarge it, and his building he was maxed out, and he said, I need a new building, and I found one, come look at it. We walked in there, pre-engineered metal building, and we said, look, you know, this is, you can't really even add any more pipe to this structure, much less you're going to add on a walk-on insulated metal panel ceiling. You're going to bring in evaporators. You're going to have to add more fire protection piping, more electrical. It won't support it. oh, you know, okay, I'll go look at some more. So he said, well, let's show you what you need to look at. And we took him to a building, showed it. Got a call about 2 weeks later. Got a great building, come look at it. We walked in, it's another pre-engineered metal building. And this went 3 or 4 times, and it just really had trouble getting it through this individual, through to them, that it's very important the type of building you have. But even if you buy a building that is not pre-engineered, the structural integrity is going to be just as important. Because when you're going and you're converting a dry space into a cold space, you're going to be hanging a lot of stuff off of that building. Or you're going to be putting a lot of stuff on the roof of that building. So you need to understand what the structural capacity is of that facility and what it's going to allow you to do. I've got a nice, pretty picture here of a warehouse that we did not long ago, and some beautiful racks, and you see that structure just kind of goes up, up, and up, and that's well in excess of 40 feet height. For this end user, clear height was of the utmost importance because they had a significant amount of racking to put in. When you do a retrofit, and again, you're going with a box-in-a-box type construction, you're putting that ceiling panel in, you're going to lose clear height. And you're probably going to lose anywhere from 2 feet to 8 feet, depending on the slope, the roof slope of that building. So clear height can absolutely become an issue. It's a little bit less of an issue if you're converting it into processing space, but if you're converting it into warehousing and storage space, it can absolutely be an issue. And floor loading. Again, I point to all these pretty red and blue racks here, and you see that they are sitting on the floor. So that building was built with the intent that it was going to have this racking system put upon it, and upon this racking system, not long after we took this picture, this client came in and loaded it up. I mean, it is full. But that's okay, because that floor was engineered to handle those loads. If you're going into an existing facility and you're going to do any type of loading on that floor, you need to know what the structural capacity and what the structural integrity of that floor may be. Temperature zones. 38 degrees, 30 degrees, 10 below, 20 below, 40 below, 60 below. What are you doing in there? How many temperature zones are you going to have? How are they going to be how are they going to be located in relation to one another? This particular facility that I'm showing right here, as you can see, is a processing facility, and we've got about 5 different temperature zones in this facility, all the way to 40 below blast freezing operations, and it's all over the place. And because of that, this was an existing facility, by the way, and although it looks new, it's an existing facility, and that's a brand new floor. Why is that a brand new floor? We had so much carving up to do to create all these freezer areas that we just came to the conclusion that let's just tear the whole floor out and start over again. Box in a box. Again, I go back to this picture. This is a box in a box construction. Some people don't like a box in a box. I personally am okay with a box in a box, but there's a lot of folks out there that don't prefer box in a box. They don't think it's the right way to go. A box in a box certainly does provide some opportunities for some problems. You're going to have a lot more penetration, as you can see with this ceiling right here. Where's mine? You've got a evaporator, we've got lights, we've got electrical cables, we've got sprinkler heads. A lot of penetrations are coming through that ceiling. But if you're going to be converting a dry facility into a cold facility, it's pretty much a given that you're going to do a box in a box, unless you're going to make some major modifications to that existing roofing system. And let's talk about the roofing system. Obviously, if you're doing a box in a box, the ability of the roofing system to provide temperature control is not that important. However, if you're going to put a refrigeration system in a building, you have a very good chance of putting pipe up on top of that roofing system. You've got maybe equipment you're going to put up in there. So you've got to look at what your roof is able to handle. If you've got a 10 or 12-year-old roof and you're going to go up there and make a bunch of holes in it and run a bunch of ammonia piping and such, then you could very easily be looking at replacing the whole roof. And fire protection, we've talked about that a little bit before in our cost analysis. Fire protection is going to differ. Do you have to go to a freezer? You're going to have to go to a dry system. Box in a box, most places that I know of are going to require you to have fire protection above the ceiling and below the ceiling. So you're basically going to put in a double fire protection system. So you're going to have cost involved in that as well. Refrigerant types, ammonia, Freon, CO2, whatever you're using. I will say that we have found that usually when you do this, folks tend more towards Freon than ammonia. But that decision needs to be made. Obviously, if you're doing ammonia, you're going to need a machine room. Our experience has been Freon. You get to a certain size of a building, and Freon's not the way to go because the long-term inefficiencies of Freon becomes outweighed by the efficiencies of an ammonia system after we found 60,000 square feet, 70,000 square feet, something in that range. However, we have found on some of the larger retrofits that folks still want to go with Freon just because of possibly the ease of the installation and because of the fact that they don't want to give up space to create a machine room. So again, you might have something that is a good idea today, but in a few years you're going to find it's going to be a bit more of a cost burden. Diffusion tanks. We're not seeing those too much in the South right now. I know out in the West Coast, seeing a lot of that. It's sort of spotty as to when they're required and when they're not required. But if you're going with an ammonia system, it's absolutely something you need to consider right now. And so if you're retrofitting a dry building and you've got to add a diffusion tank, then that's something you've got to dedicate some land to and obviously some cost to. Because if you've done a diffusion tank, you realize that they are not an inexpensive option. And then slabs. We've already talked about slabs. If you're going with the freezer, you're going to have to do something to that slab. I have been in a facility where they don't do anything with the slab, and you go back and see them about 6 months, and you do something with the slab. But you're going to have to take that slab out, or you're going to have to build on top of it. You're going to have to do something with that slab. And even more to the point, if you're doing a food processing facility, and you've got a high amount of floor drains that you're having to put in, again, you sometimes come to the conclusion that you're better off just go ahead and taking the whole slab out and building a new one. Paving, parking, does it provide you what you need? Is it going to be acceptable to what you need? You go into these existing facilities, they're going to have some level of truck paving and truck storage, trailer storage. Refrigerated facilities, a lot of folks like to have reefers setting out, maybe have them setting out for a period of time. Do you have that storage capacity? Do you have room to expand your paving and parking needs to what you need? Your dock doors, your leveler upgrades, are they going to work? Do you need to bring in new doors? Do you need insulated doors in your cooler dock? So certainly some things to consider there as well. Electrical power and water. We talked about that before. If you're in an existing facility, power and water are going to be there. I would tell you that the majority of the time we find if we're doing a due diligence on converting a dry warehouse, there's not adequate electrical power to supply what that facility needs to run a refrigeration system. So that usually means we have to go back to the utility company and either get a new service in or get an additional transformer or a new transformer or replace a transformer, something of that nature. Water is usually not as big of a problem, but we have found it to be a problem because you're going to have some water needs. Typically in a dry warehouse, the word dry is very appropriate. They've got water for the restrooms and the break rooms, and a lot of times that's just about it. So you've got some greater water needs, of course, with a cold storage facility. Now, I got a picture here of a condenser, and for those of us in the room, this is a thing of beauty. We love seeing buildings with these on top of them because that means that's our world, that's what we live in, that's what we do. I regret to inform you that outside of this room, most people would not see that as a very beautiful piece of architecture. And the other thing is they're loud. I mean, we've all heard them, they're loud. So if you've got a dry facility and you're going in and you're going to convert that, and you put that beautiful little piece of machinery up on the roof and you turn that thing on, the neighbors may be a little upset, and you may have some noise ordinances that you might even be violating. And I know that we're seeing more and more noise ordinances being put in place that we've got to deal with. And that leads us to zoning. Typically, if you're converting, you don't have a zoning issue, but there will be time to time that you will have some zoning things you need to look at. I get back to the point of reefers. If you're parking reefers out and your business requires you to have those reefers sitting out in that lot for 8 or 10 hours or whatever while they're waiting there to load or to go to their next stop, you got some noise issues and you just may run into some zoning. You can't discount the fact that you may have some zoning issues to deal with when you convert, so that's something you've got to look at. And finally, tax implications, government incentives. I've talked a little bit about that. There could be some incentives to be lost by going with a retrofit versus a greenfield development. And there could be some tax implications as well that need to be considered. So, with that said, where are we at? And how are we concluding this thing? I think it may have come across as though I'm trying to say, build, don't buy and convert. And I'm not saying that at all. That's not where I'm at. I can tell you at A.M. King, it really doesn't matter to us. If you want us to convert, we'll convert. If you want us to build, we'll build. And I think most of my competitors in the room or others would look at it the same way. We want to do what our clients want us to do. But I am saying this. For a conversion to work, it typically requires a perfect storm. A lot of things have to happen, and a lot of things have to be in place. So it's not something that can just come about. There's got to be a lot of factors in place that are going to allow this to happen. The next thing is be prepared to do a significant amount of due diligence. I cannot understate the importance of the due diligence required to do one of these conversions. And like I said, I've mentioned a bunch of things up here. We could spend hours talking about box in a box and the good and bad. So these are not small items to consider. So it requires a significant amount of due diligence. And I go back to thinking about what's the possibility of this happening. So how much time, effort, money, resources do you want to spend looking at this due diligence, knowing that the possibility of this being a viable option? How much time and effort do you want to spend doing that? And finally, I'm going to throw a little love out here to the room. Here at IACSC, we're very big on saying we want owners, operators, clients to use IACSC folks. And I absolutely want to say that if you're considering doing something like this, you need an expert team. You need folks that know what you're doing, that know what they're doing. And you need to surround yourself with folks like folks that are in this room or part of this organization. Or if you are involved in one of these as a consultant, as an engineer, I'm a big believer in something like this. The more folks you have, the better. And the more brains you have behind this, the better. Because there's so many things to consider, and there's so many things you need to look at. So surround yourself with the best people and the best team before you dive into one of these projects.